the Citizens' Assembly had a solution to dealing with agricultural emissions, and that was a carbon tax. You know, again, it's one of those incredibly divisive issues. But is it something that's out there in your thinking, or would you just rather not think about it?
Well, I suppose as a civil servant, I'm awfully loath to get involved in kind of what is a policy development position in terms of the Citizens' Assembly has done its work. It will report back to the Oireachtas for debate.
So I don't want you saying anything you don't want to. It's just you might know a bit about it, that's all.
The message for me is very clear in terms of the Citizens' Assembly is that, you know, whether you agree or disagree in terms of their particular proposed approach, let's be clear, it is sending a message around the general population having an interest in resolving the issue of climate change and wanting to contribute. For me, then, that puts agriculture has to reflect on you're either perceived as part of the problem or part of the solution here. We very much envisage ourselves as part of the solution here. And I think if you look at everybody that spoke today has put sustainability somewhere within their messaging, whether it's the Commissioner, whether it's the market piece already. And for us, it's core. Now, I would just urge everybody then to reflect. We have a lot of good material. We have a very good news story to tell, but we need to reflect on where to from now. And I think the urgency and the pace at which we engage in terms of the improvements, etc., really needs to crank up. Now, if you then stand back from that, it must be translated from a policy perspective into something that people understand, they can align with, and they can implement at farm level. And that's going to be our ambition in terms of those conversations. But equally so, stakeholders, etc., will have to recognise, yes, we have a good news story, but it certainly needs to improve if we're going to keep with, I suppose, the level of involvement and interest on that sustainability piece as we go forward.
Okay, do you have any thoughts on that, Jerry?
Well, I think the suckler cow comes in for a bad rap often. I'm not sure exactly what the Citizens' Assembly were thinking of. I presume some sort of a carbon equivalent tax, because, of course, we do have a carbon tax on fossil fuels at the moment. I guess one of the interesting questions is when you think of sustainability, and I think it's important that we think of all of the dimensions. I think that was mentioned this morning. You've got economic, social and environmental. And certainly for a lot of farmers in Ireland, the suckler cow is a source of economic sustainability. And therefore that's why it's a particularly sensitive issue. And again, you can look at the number of suckler cows, and in an extreme scenario where you did an exercise to see, well, what happens if we didn't have a suckler herd? Yes, we would reduce emissions, but we would also have to then deal with all the other issues that follow from that. As I say, economic sustainability would be an issue. Also, and a very important point when it comes to biodiversity. There's two dimensions to that. I think most people think of biodiversity in the context of intensive farming damaging biodiversity. But the other side of that, and certainly I think it's a huge issue, is the issue of land abandonment. In other words, we know in very, very valuable upland areas, farming is essential to maintain the landscape. So, you know, I think this is a complex story. And I think we should exhaust all of the potential technologies that are there to reduce greenhouse gases. We haven't talked at all about the potential of sequestration, although it's been mentioned this morning, not in this discussion. But
I'm coming on to that. There's one other
by far the most significant opportunity.
I'm going to come on to that in a minute, but first of all, Laura, I want you to tell me, what's our biggest problem right now environmentally? Is it water? Is it methane? What is it?
This is a bit like Jerry talking about things being complex. You can't just say it's all climate change or it's all water. It's a combination, and biodiversity, of course, as well. So I think if you look, and Bill alluded to it in his presentation, it's all three. You know, we have to address climate change, we have to address water issues, we have to address biodiversity.
So even if you can't have it all, you have to do it all?
You have to do elements of it all, and there's different elements of of solutions. And just one thing in the context of water I wanted to highlight, because I thought it was really interesting, the Commissioner talking about regional variations across Europe, and what works in, in Spain wouldn't necessarily work in Ireland, etc., etc. We're also seeing that in the context of water quality, that there's regional variations in Ireland. So what might be suitable in one area of Ireland with regard to intensification will not be suitable in others. And so there's not one easy solution to all of these environmental issues. They're going to be a combination of solutions and different solutions in different places. But the other aspect of it, I think, that we also need to recognise, and Carmel had mentioned it earlier, was different actors taking responsibility for different parts of the system. All different layers within this system can do different things. The government have particular responsibilities. Food processing sectors responsibilities, and farmers at an individual level will have responsibility. And what I certainly see in the promotion of Ireland Inc. as being, clean and green, is that we're now as strong as our weakest link. So if one part of that chain ends up causing a problem within the system, and we've seen it before, and we as a regulatory agency have seen it before historically with issues that have ended up materialising in the European stage, then all of Ireland's reputation will be gone. And I think that's something, so it's for our own self-interest as well that we really need to drive the sustainability and take action.
All right, and then talk to me about that issue of sequestration, and particularly afforestation, which has been mentioned several times this morning, and I know the Minister has a particular interest in it. Maybe we might get a mic and hear from you on that in this session. Go on ahead, Laura.
Well, certainly this is an area that we are looking at. The EPA has our own research budget. We fund environmental research around just under 10 million euros a year. One of the very significant areas in that is climate change, and as part of that is sequestration. Forestry certainly has a key role to play. We've seen an increase in forestry over the last number of years. The department will be able to talk much more eloquently about it than I would, but we're still seeing barriers. And I think what we need to do is, well, what are the barriers to addressing that? Why aren't farmers, why aren't individuals taking this up? And that's sometimes we have the technologies. I'm also thinking the likes of anaerobic digestion for other activities. We have the technology, but we still don't see the behavioural change, or we don't see things being taken up. And I think that's something we also need to research. Sometimes we have the knowledge, but how you transfer that into action.
Because, Minister, I was interested at the reference earlier to your view that, farmers don't want to plant good land with trees, and that there's fear and stigma around this. Well, talk to us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, well, traditionally it was seen that if somebody decided to plant their land with trees, that it was seen as that they had failed as a farmer, to put it quite bluntly. And I don't think that necessarily need be the case. Now, I might make the point when I have the opportunity, if things had gone as they were earlier, I was meant to address my 3 areas of responsibility. They've come up over the course of the discussions: horticulture, forestry, and indeed organics. So maybe if I just go through the 3 of them when I have the opportunity on you, is that okay? Because I think it's relevant to the discussion. Yeah. So with forestry, it does play a key role in our sustainability effort in the first place for the whole agricultural sector. And it's estimated that our forests absorb around 4 million tonnes of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere each year. And this sequestration, as has been mentioned, is central to achieving our climate change goals and as part of the overall approach to carbon neutrality in the agri sector.
So are we working on the prejudice, basically? Are we working on the stigma? Are we working to retrain farmers?
Both, and retraining farmers, but on the advisory side, I mean, we have an extensive research program funded by the department and also an advisory component. I've a vested interest here. I have a small forest myself, and
you lucky man. Imagine growing trees. I think that's a great thing.
I think there's kind of 2 sectors, if you like. There's the people who are substantial planters of trees, but I think what we'll probably see happening, and we'll certainly want to encourage along with the department, is that, for example, every dairy farmer and every beef farmer could identify a small area on their farm that they could plant, and that will contribute. as
So
well
it's an
as
issue for all farmers,
well,
Minister.
I think if you look at the bioeconomy discussion, it's part and parcel of that as well. So yes, every farmer, every landowner, and I think it goes to the wider discussion, is we should have a total land use policy. As opposed to an agricultural policy, a land energy policy, wind energy policy, biomass. We need a total land use policy that develops all of those in sync, so that we look at environmental concerns, but we have to match land with its best use, so that we look after the environment, we achieve carbon neutrality in our agri-growth sector. Look, from the point of view of forestry, the government's committed to 106 million a year in an afforestation programme. We've just conducted and finished conducting a consultation on a mid-term review, which we hope to publish in the next couple of weeks, which will hopefully reboot the AFOR programme. And it has come in for justifiable criticism over the last period. The Commissioner mentioned it earlier. Okay. But we are conscious of that. We're conscious of the role that it plays.
And the point Charles was making, again, about meat production, but organics as well. And I know that's a sector you're responsible for. Is it, a lot of people think it's great, it's very nice, but it's ultimately always going to be niche. So organics and horticulture, how do you see those developing, and how can they contribute here?
Well, both have a role. I mean, if you take horticulture, we have probably some of the best growing conditions for fruit and vegetables and the wider mushrooms and indeed the protected amenity crops, protected crops in the amenity sector. But we've witnessed in certain areas market displacement by imports. So first of all, we look at market opportunities to develop that. We need our partners insofar as that we have large-scale retailers who control the outlet, the distribution to the customer. We need them on board, so we have established a horticulture industry forum, which is bringing, next phase will be to bring our partners together. So that's one. With organics, yes, it will be niche, but I remember years ago listening to a community organic project in Denmark, and the chief executive introduced himself. He says, we're a business disguised as an organic farm. So it is a business as well. We have a very successful organic scheme here. We've gone from 4.2 million a year to 10 million. So we're going to shortly introduce a new, I think Bill will be involved in it, we're introducing a new organic focus group to set out the next goals for the next period. So we have doubled our output from 1% to 2%, which mightn't sound a lot, but it's actually a fair achievement, and funded it when resources were quite limited.
And the other thing that I was very interested to hear the Commissioner talking about, and again advocating, Bill, that we do a lot more, is the bioeconomy. What's that, and what more can we be doing there, or what plans do we have in that area? And maybe Pierre, you'd come in on that as well. Okay, well, the bioeconomy is adding value to a lot of streams that are coming from the agricultural byproducts in particular, so adding value in relation to agricultural byproducts, etc. And the department is working with other departments. Like and the urea, for instance, as a fertiliser? Pardon? Yes. Like urine for fertiliser, yeah? Exactly. Look, I used the example that many years ago as a trainee agriculturalist, I fed whey to animals, and it was used as a byproduct and it was a feed. Now it's a high value added product on the American market in terms of supplement for very health conscious individuals. Now that's the transition in terms of bioeconomy, from moving from a byproduct to a value product. Now, if you look at nutraceuticals, if you look at all those opportunities, added value from biomass in the forestry sector. So I suppose at national level, there will be a bioeconomy statement from Taoiseachs which will frame, I suppose, the ambition in relation to that, and agriculture will co-chair a group in relation to implementation of that. But it certainly is something that's critical. And that's what I mean about agriculture being as much about part of the solution as part of the problem in terms of the environmental challenge. Yes, indeed, Pierre. And Pierre, I'm listening to this discussion, and while we're talking about agriculture, I was thinking in a way, you know when you get your washing machine and it's got an energy rating, but you know when you buy it, what's going to happen to the packaging? and the manufacturer has made a plan for the packaging, because that's part of producing the washing machine. And the same, when I buy the washing machine, I know at the end of its life they're going to take it away and there's going to be a recycling plan for it. In other words, that we don't just produce food for the market, but we produce food for the market, and we're also looking at all the energy costs along the way, the environmental costs along the way. There's a plan for that, and there's also a plan then even after the food has gone, if you like, from the producer to the person who, the supermarket or wherever. And I'll come back to you on that. First, Pierre.
No, very much. I fully agree, I think, with the comments you made, and I think also the clarification from Bill. I think the bioeconomy, I think, is very much, in my view, I think a very good example. It's a prime example showing that agriculture and the primary sector at large and forestry are part of the problem of environment and climate, but they can be part, I think, of the solution.
Yeah.
And I think the bioeconomy can really provide, I think, more information about, basically what is coming out, I think, from the farm sector and how it is being used. It's about creating value. It's about also maximizing, I think, the use, I think, of all the biomass, I think, produced, I think, by the farm sector and the forestry sector. So it's a way also of creating new economic values. It's a way also of decarbonizing, I think, the economy. Yeah. There's a lot of potential with byproduct, co-product, waste, I think, from the farm sector and the forestry sector to substitute, I think, products, I think, which are basically right now, fossil-based. So, and the technology exists in many parts of the economy. I was recently in Finland. I think they have developed a lot of new technologies in order to better exploit wood product and forestry products at large. So this bioeconomy is very much, I think, a way to enhance, I think, the contribution and the development, I think, of the farm sector. And this is why, I think, coming back, I think, to the discussion that we had before, I think sustainability should be seen not as a real challenge or constraint, but should be seen, I think, as an opportunity. It's an opportunity to do better in terms of resource efficiency and an opportunity to become more competitive and to add value, because this is what the consumer wants, this is what the taxpayer wants, and in the long term, it's an issue, I would say, almost of survival. Yeah. In 30, 40 years, we can't continue like this. In 30, 40 years, if we don't change our production system, if we don't change, I think, the whole food system, we will be in great difficulty. So the bioeconomy is one element that can help, I think, to sustain and to develop.
And even in that sense, Food Cloud is part of the bioeconomy then, isn't it?
Yeah, so I think what we're seeing is, specifically in the area of food waste and the bioeconomy, is there's a lack of data about where there is waste and why it's there, and that drives innovation and technology. So the Commissioner mentioned the Sustainable Development Goals, so food waste has been put in specifically, so we have to halve food waste by 2030. So Ireland is committed to that as well. And I suppose a big focus on that is the fact that we don't know where all the food is wasted. So it could be a byproduct, it could be driving innovation. Our solution is redistributing, but there are other byproducts and things that can happen. So we're seeing industry take action, but where industry aren't taking action, then government are having to do it. So there's a Champions 12.3 group that Ornu have actually signed up for, and 24 major companies have committed to declaring their food waste data by the end of next year. And that in itself will drive innovation and technology. But at the moment, the food system is so complex that it's difficult to know where food is wasted and why, and then driving innovation around byproducts, or, if there is no innovation, that's where we step in and make sure it can go to people first. So that's a huge part, and if Ireland don't take action on that, we're starting to see EU legislation coming down the track. So that's an area that we'd particularly love to see data collection and transparency around data, which we believe will drive the innovation.
Kevin, you're nodding there.
Yeah, I mean, I think the key word here is responsibility, and Laura called it out earlier on. Consumers are telling us that they expect us to take more responsibility, and they want more hard facts. It's like anything in business. If you set about measuring it, you'll manage it. And I think for us, working with Evine's team and indeed Tara McCarthy's team in Bord Bia, we've invested 800,000 on the ESTAS scheme. working with Teagasc, doing research and innovation, a lot of money being invested there. But also we've set some targets in our business that we can be quite specific with and rally people around. We've 15% reduction in carbon emissions across all of our sites by 2021. We're going to have a 10% reduction in wastewater by 2021. We've a targeted 25% reduction in food waste by 2021. And we've entered into a partnership, a small number of core suppliers with Tesco, to adapt the UN Sustainability Development Goal to have food waste by 2030. So consumers are telling us, step up, take responsibility, show us stuff that's actually physically happening, because that's the journey they want to be on with you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. It's been a fascinating discussion. Will you give the panel a round of applause, please? Thank you.